entitled Parents Become the Laughingstock of the Zoo. I work at a petting zoo. Today, 2 prepubescent kids came in and started terrorizing everyone here. They started screaming every curse word under the sun at everyone and harassed my animals by running after them and kicking them. One of my colleagues was taking a phone call and the kids decided that she was a good target for some reason. This woman cannot take confrontation. They started walking into her while she was sitting down and started screaming in her ears. I was not present during this, but my colleague came to me distressed about the kids. I went to them and asked them again politely to leave. I asked them before, but they did not leave. That was enough for the kids to stay out by the gate and scream and kick the fences. We told them to stop multiple times politely, but to no avail. Eventually they circled around and threw empty cans at my goats and sheep. They came back around and started bad-mouthing us yet again. Another one of my colleagues went to them and asked them to cool down. The profanity that came out of their mouth just shocked me. I walked a little further away while I saw my colleague going for the hose. I knew what he was going to do. While I was inside, I heard the kids scream. Today was quite a hot day, 30 Celsius, so I didn't think it was that bad what he did. The colleague came back with a big smile. I asked him what he did even though I already knew. He said he sprayed them. Now they should be cooled down, he chuckled. They went away. Fast forward 20 minutes later and the kids come back, with the mom. She is so mad that she almost slammed the door into the kid's face, almost. I'm already thinking this should be interesting. Can you explain to me why my son came home crying? She yelled. Me and my colleagues looked at each other and they just started laughing. We explained to the mom what happened and she is not taking it. You pushed my son to the ground, he is only 8, she yelled as she pointed to my female colleague from earlier. She is dumbfounded because she didn't push him to the ground but pushed him away. She explains it. The mom does not believe her. The colleague demonstrated what she did. That doesn't excuse you for touching my kid, mommy yelled. My colleagues calmly but with a panicked voice explained that her kids kept walking into her while she was on her phone and screaming into her ears. Still doesn't excuse you, mommy crossed her arms. My colleague stood up and walked away. She focused her attention on the other colleague. And you? She pointed at him. You destroyed my son's bike while spraying them with water. This colleague does not take BS from anyone and said to her, do you want to know why? There is no excuse, you destroyed his bike, mom said. This is where I jump in because I have not been present for both those interactions, but no one talks to my colleagues like this. So what is broken? I asked politely. The battery. She huffed. I'm already dumbfounded because a battery can take some water. Does it work? I ask. Yes, but. I interrupted her. So nothing is broken. That's not the point, he shouldn't have sprayed them with water, mom said. I understand your anger, ma'am, but your boys did ask for this, I said. Trying to explain what the boys did in order for them to receive a hose. Mom did not like my reasoning because son dearest can't do anything wrong. I explained that actions have consequences. But nope, this action was uncalled for. I told her that her kids were really rude to me and my staff. Not only that, but the words they yelled at me and visitors around here were not welcome in here. He would never say that. Our camera will say otherwise. This point she realizes the cameras. So you have proof that one of your colleagues attacked my kid and the other one used brute force on them. I will get my husband here and he already has a criminal record, so you better watch your tongue. My male colleague talks down on the women. Respect is earned and the way they are behaving they do not get any respect. Is that a threat? I ought to sue you for damage. Me jumping back and I recall you said nothing broke. Well, if it does I know where to find you. This sounds like a threat and we do not take kindly to threats, my colleague said. Is that a threat? She said. Take that how you will. They go back and forth, not going anywhere and repeating the same stuff over and over. Somewhere in the back and forward the kid said, what kind of petting zoo mistreats kids? Eventually I jumped back in again. The ones who deserve it. Mom turns her anger to me. I have a problem with your colleagues, the one who laid hands on my kid and is secretly listening in and the one who hosed them. It is my problem if you threaten my colleagues. Fire them, the mom said. Excuse me? I was surprised by this response. You heard me, fire them, they both hurt my kids. Ma'am, please leave, we aren't getting anywhere here and your attitude towards my colleagues and me is not welcome here. Actions have consequences, do they not? Yes ma'am, and so do yours, so this is your last chance before we call the police. This is the moment she realizes she is not getting anywhere with us. While walking away she screamed, I know you're open till 7:30 and my husband will come. None of us corrected her because we are open till 5 and this happened at 4:45. As she was leaving with the kids, my colleague got the hose, and sprayed them all down as soon as they left. Tomorrow should be an interesting day at work. Doctors, what's the creepiest case you've ever encountered? I've been a doctor for 10 years and have come across a lot of weird cases, but nothing like this. I was working the night shift and that's when most of the weird activity happens. As I was making my rounds on the East Wing, a few nurses brought in a man who looked unconscious and covered in wounds, no pulse and pupils dilated. I could have called it right then and there, but for whatever reason, I knew he wasn't completely deceased. I checked all the vitals and pupillary response and nothing, but the thing was, this man had begun to twitch, was cold to the touch and skin was pale as plain paper. You would swear he was dead, but it seemed a little premature to declare him. When I opened his mouth I got the shock of my life. Immediately I backed up and had my nurses take him to a private room. Immediately, I began to hyperventilate at the sight. After calming down I went to a private room and instructed the nurses to strap him down. They just looked at me like I was crazy. They questioned why I instructed this. As they did so, I asked one of the nurses to leave, leaving me with the senior nurse who I had been working with for some time now. I went and slid the door and locked it as my nurse just watched. I looked at her and I could tell she could see the fear in my face, and she asked, "What's wrong with you? Haven't seen you this shaken up since your first day." I looked at her and smirked nervously, and I walked up to the man, opened his mouth and shone my hand light inside. I looked at her and replied, "What do you see here? What does that look like to you?" She leans in, looking inside the man's mouth unimpressed for a few seconds, and her eyes widen suddenly. "The hell? Are those real?" She whispers as I begin to venture his gum lines, inspecting all the teeth he had, and I pull back and stay on the chair behind me as she starts to hyperventilate herself. "Those can't be real, like maybe cosmetic surgery or something, right?" I shake my head, disagreeing with her statement. "The gum line isn't torn and doesn't look to be any tampering. Now, if I'm not mistaken, humans don't have teeth like that, and they definitely don't have 4 of them on the canine teeth. What I think we have here is something we aren't supposed to have in our hospital." She looks at me with wide eyes, with her hands on her heart holding a cross. "You don't think? I mean, is that possible?" I shake my head. "I don't know, honestly. I think what we have here is the impossible. I don't even want to say it, but I think we have a mutant in the hospital." We sat in silence for a few minutes, wondering what to do next as this man tossed slightly, still strapped down. Stumped at what to do next, I felt it was my duty to protect the people in the ER, and I decided to take this man or thing to a safer location of the hospital. Paranoia hit me like a ton of bricks as I stood over this being in front of me. I instructed the nurse to open the door as I began to will him out of the room before putting a blanket over his entire body and hiding his face, which seemed pretty much human. I managed to will him past a few doors, and without warning, I was approached by these men in suits and sunglasses, looking like government officials. They stopped the gurney and held their hands out, stopping me from going any further. They took the man down the hallway as one official looked me up and down and without a word, walked away just like nothing had happened. I managed to follow them to the back entrance and see them loading the man into the back of a black van, followed by several other black cars, which I thought was strange. They drove off as quickly as they came, and just like that, they were gone. My best friend betrayed me, lied to me, and slept with my wife. I met my wife Sue in college. We hit it off as soon as we went on our first date and were spewing "I love you" within weeks of us dating. When her dad passed away in her senior year of college, I was there for her through the whole ordeal. Her father had pancreatic cancer. And when he was hospitalized, I'd spend nights at the hospital with her so she wouldn't be alone. I knew I was going to marry this girl, and sure enough, I popped the question about 2 years after we graduated. My best friend Dave and I had what I could only describe as an unbreakable brotherly bond, or so I thought. We had known each other since 3rd grade, and he was the brother I never had. He was also married, and moved away with his wife because she had landed a lucrative job at a big law firm. About a year ago, his wife died in a car crash, and this broke him. He moved back to our hometown after, but he was never the same. I tried to be there for him, but he wouldn't engage with anyone. No one understood the pain he was going through. So I asked my wife if she could talk to him, seeing as she had also lost a loved one, and that maybe Dave could relate better with someone who went through something similar. We'd pay him visits daily. She would spend hours on end at his place even without me there. They were going on hikes together, watching movies and not inviting me, grabbing lunch, all things couples do. Now obviously this was far more interaction than I had intended for them to have, and it did make me uncomfortable, but Dave was doing much better from it. It's important to say that Dave and Sue never liked each other before all this happened. This is because Sue always thought he was a jerk. Before he married his wife, Dave was bouncing from relationship to relationship, and even after he got with his wife, he constantly cheated on her. As a result, Sue had a particular dislike for him and always questioned how I could be friends with someone with such low morals. This disdain for Dave is also what made me oblivious to what was to come. As I mentioned, Sue and Dave became inseparable, to the point where she would invite him to things I had planned for us as a couple. Moreover, she started portraying characteristics of what I now know to be classic cheater behavior, always on her phone, becoming increasingly distant, little to no intimacy, and coming home very late. At this point it was all too suspicious, and one day she was texting and I asked who she was talking to. She said it was one of her girlfriends, and when I asked to see what they were saying she became very irritated and called me possessive. When I talked to Dave about how uncomfortable their friendship was making me, he assured me nothing was up and even accused me of not trusting him and my own wife. I was getting gaslit. This continued until one day Sue went out again. She said she was going to her sister's for the weekend because she needed some space from me because I was driving her crazy with my accusations. I was still very suspicious and called her sister to confirm if she was indeed expecting Sue to visit. She confirmed that she was, but that Sue had not yet arrived. Mind you, she left around 3 p.m. and her sister's place is about 4 hours away from where we live. It was now 10 p.m. Something in the back of my head told me to go to my friend's house, so I did. Sure enough, my wife's car is parked a couple of feet away from my friend's house. At this point it was clear as day as to what was going on, and I hate to admit it, but I cried hard. After a few minutes I decided to go in and see if this is really what was happening. I went in through the back door, which I knew would be open. I quietly made my way in and I could hear my wife panting. I was shaking. When I made it to the door of his bedroom I could see through the creak. My wife, leaning on his nightstand. I'll never get that image out of my head. I pushed the door wide open and they both froze, staring at me. It took every ounce of my being not to slap the living hell out of Dave. I just walked away and got into my car. I could hear them scrambling and my wife started screaming at me to stop and that she could explain. I didn't want to look at her. I don't know what I would have done, so I just drove away. I cried the entire drive home and they were both spamming me with calls. I went to one of my college friends and have been here the past week or so. Someone help me please.